Close your eyes and picture a caveman, cold, scared, running from a tiger, grunting. That's the picture we've all been sold. But deep inside a cave in France, scientists found something that breaks that picture completely. A wall, covered in paintings, made by candlelight over 36,000 years ago. Someone sat in the dark, on purpose, just to make something beautiful. That is not survival. That is art. That is fun. So let's go find out what cave people really did when the hunting was done and the fire was lit. Here's the thing nobody tells you about early humans. Staying alive was not a full-time job. Once the fire was going, the meat was cooking, and the cave was safe, there were hours left in the day. Long, quiet hours. And humans, being humans, filled those hours with exactly what we still do today. Art, music, games, gossip, and looking good. We're talking about a time between roughly 40,000 and 12,000 years ago, a period called the Upper Paleolithic. No writing existed yet, so we can't read their diaries, but we can read their walls, their bones, their beads, and their fire pits, and those objects tell a surprisingly detailed story. One honest note before we start. Most of this evidence survived by accident, buried in dry caves. Whatever people made from wood, plant fiber, or skin mostly rotted away centuries ago, so we're only seeing a small, lucky slice of everything they actually did for fun. Let's start with the big one, cave art. In Chauvet Cave in southern France, there are paintings of horses, lions, and rhinos so detailed and confident that when they were first discovered, some experts assumed they had to be fake. Surely cave people couldn't paint this well. They were wrong. Those paintings are roughly 36,000 years old. A different cave, Lascaux, has paintings closer to 17,000 years old, showing massive bulls painted with such energy they seem to be running across the wall. And here's a detail most people miss. These paintings were often placed deep inside caves in total darkness, reachable only by torchlight, in spots that were clearly not meant for daily living. Some historians believe these chambers worked almost like the world's first movie theater, a special dramatic space people entered on purpose to experience something. Flickering torchlight actually makes painted animals appear to move slightly, almost like an ancient flipbook effect. People also left something incredibly personal on these walls, handprints, made by blowing pigment around a hand pressed flat against the stone. Some of these hand-shaped signatures belonged to children. Whoever painted these walls wanted to be remembered, and 36,000 years later, it worked. Now picture the same cave, but at night, with a different kind of art happening. Sound. In a cave in Germany, archaeologists found a flute carved from a vulture's wing bone, with finger holes drilled carefully along its length. It's around 40,000 years old, making it one of the oldest known musical instruments on Earth. Someone sat down, took a hollow bone, and turned it into music. Not for hunting, not for warning, just for the joy of a good sound. And it likely wasn't played alone. Historians believe music was probably a group activity. Clapping, humming, simple drums made from stretched hide, maybe even rhythm tapped out on hollow logs or antlers. Music like this probably filled a lot of roles at once: a lullaby for children, a beat for dancing, a way to mark a special hunt, or just background noise for a good evening by the fire. Here's a fun thought. The notes produced by that ancient vulture bone flute aren't wildly different from a simple modern recorder. Whoever carved it understood something about spacing holes to make a scale. 40,000 years before music theory had a name, someone already had an ear for it. Here's a question. Did cave people play games? The evidence says yes, and it's older than you'd expect. In the Congo, archaeologists found a carved bone, now called the Ishango bone, covered in neat rows of notches, roughly 20,000 years old. Historians still argue about exactly what it was for. Some think it's a tally stick for counting days or moon cycles. Others think it could have been used for a simple counting game between two people. Either way, someone sat down and carefully carved dozens of matching marks into bone, which takes real patience, the kind of patience usually reserved for something enjoyable, not just chores. We also have simpler, more universal evidence. small round pebbles worn smooth, sometimes found in small clusters, which many archaeologists believe were used in early tossing or juggling-style games. Children's play likely included string games similar to cat's cradle, since simple looped string patterns appear across nearly every hunter-gatherer culture ever studied, suggesting the game is old enough to have spread with early human migration itself. And just like kids everywhere today, cave children almost certainly played by imitating grown-up life, throwing small toy spears at targets, practicing skills, but mostly just having a good time doing it. Cave people cared about how they looked. That's not a joke, it's an archaeological fact. In Blombos Cave, in South Africa, researchers found small shell beads with tiny holes drilled through them, deliberately pierced so they could be strung together into necklaces or bracelets. These beads are roughly 75,000 years old, which is even older than most of the cave paintings we just talked about. Someone picked a specific shell, drilled a careful hole without cracking it, and wore it, or gave it to someone else to wear. That is jewelry. Red ochre pigment, the same material used in cave paintings, also shows up as body decoration, likely rubbed onto skin or hair, possibly for ceremonies, possibly just because it looked striking in firelight. And this wasn't only a Homo sapiens habit. Evidence in Croatia shows Neanderthals collected eagle talons and shaped them, likely into jewelry too, meaning the urge to decorate ourselves isn't even unique to our species. Whether it was a shell necklace, red pigment across the cheekbones, or a carefully shaped talon worn as a pendant, the message is the same one people are still sending today. I want to look like myself, and I want you to notice. At the end of the day, once the painting was done, the music had played, and the games were finished, there was still one activity left, the oldest form of entertainment we know of: talking. Sitting around a fire and telling a story. We can't dig up an ancient story the way we dig up a bone flute, but here's the clever part. Anthropologists have studied modern hunter-gatherer communities that still live a similar lifestyle today and found something fascinating. Daytime conversation is usually practical: where to find food, who saw what animal, simple logistics. But nighttime conversation, around the fire, shifts almost entirely into storytelling, myths, memories, jokes, and gossip about other group members. Researchers believe this pattern is extremely old, possibly stretching back tens of thousands of years, because firelight does something to the human brain. It signals safety, which frees up mental energy for imagination instead of survival alerts. Cave art itself supports this theory. Many paintings appear to show sequences, animals in motion, possibly hinting at storytelling scenes passed down and repainted over generations. Every culture on Earth still does a version of this today. Friends gathered, phone flashlights instead of firelight, but the exact same impulse. Tell me something. Make me laugh. Make me feel something. That instinct did not start with television. It started around a fire. A very, very long time ago. Not every leisure activity back then was quiet and thoughtful. A lot of it was loud, physical, and probably a little dangerous. Wrestling matches likely happened often. It's one of the simplest ways humans test strength and settle small disagreements without real weapons. And it shows up in nearly every ancient culture we've ever studied, going back as far as evidence allows us to look. Foot races were probably common too. Since running fast wasn't just useful for hunting, it doubled as a way to show off, and showing off is a very old human hobby. Children almost certainly practice these same physical skills through play, chasing each other, wrestling in smaller, gentler versions, throwing rocks at targets for accuracy practice. Anthropologists studying present-day hunter-gatherer groups, used carefully as a comparison, not a perfect copy of the deep past. Consistently find that children in these communities play constantly, often mimicking adult tasks like hunting or building, but almost always turning it into a game rather than treating it like a chore. This detail matters because it tells us something important. Play likely wasn't a reward earned after work was done. For early humans, play and skill building were often the exact same activity, wrapped into one. Here's a leisure activity that might surprise you. Spending time with a pet. Somewhere between roughly 40,000 and 15,000 years ago, the exact window is still debated by scientists, a wild wolf population began a slow transformation into something new, the domestic dog. Nobody knows the full story of how it started, but one popular theory is surprisingly casual. Wolves that were a little calmer and less afraid of humans may have started hanging around camps, drawn in by scraps of food, and over many, many generations, the friendlier ones stuck around, while the more nervous ones kept their distance. Slowly, without anyone planning it, a new relationship formed. Fossil evidence from multiple ancient sites shows dog-like remains buried carefully alongside humans, sometimes with clear signs of care, suggesting these animals weren't just useful for hunting help or camp protection. They were companions, in every sense we'd recognize today. This is the emotional peak of the video. Picture a cave family at the end of a long day, fire crackling and curled up beside them, a dog, half wolf, already loyal, already home. That bond, a human and a dog, just relaxing together, might be one of the oldest, most unchanged forms of leisure in this entire video. One last leisure activity, and it's one you can still do tonight, exactly the same way. Looking up. With no city lights, no pollution, the night sky for early humans would have been overwhelming. Thousands of stars visible at once, and no phone to distract from it. Some researchers believe those carved notches we mentioned earlier, like the ones on the Ashango bone, might connect to another quiet nighttime hobby, tracking the moon. The moon's cycle repeats roughly every 29.5 days, and a set of carefully counted notches lines up suspiciously well with that pattern. If this theory is correct, it means someone, tens of thousands of years ago, lay outside at night, watched the moon change shape night after night, and kept score. Not because they were told to, just because they were curious. That is genuinely one of the oldest human activities we can imagine. Lying back, looking up, and wondering what's actually going on up there. Thousands of generations later, we built telescopes, then satellites, then rovers on Mars, chasing the exact same curiosity that started with someone lying on their back outside a cave, watching the sky, just because it was beautiful, and they had the time to notice. So here's what we found. Long before writing, before cities, before anything we'd call civilization, humans were already painting for the joy of it, making music because it sounded good, playing games that made them laugh, decorating themselves to feel good, telling stories to feel connected, wrestling and racing for fun, keeping a dog by the fire just because they loved it, and lying outside at night, wondering about the stars. None of that was required for survival, and maybe that's exactly the point. Some researchers actually believe play, art, and connection weren't just a bonus for early humans. They may have been the glue that held small groups together, built trust, passed down knowledge, and helped our species outlast a genuinely brutal environment. In other words, fun wasn't a break from survival. For cave people, fun might have quietly been part of survival itself. So the next time you laugh with a friend, play a game, or just lie outside looking up at the sky, know this: you're not doing anything new. you're doing the oldest human tradition there is.